Call me Ishmael. 3 words, my perfect prose pursuers. A quiet, unassuming declaration that introduces us to a man who's not just the narrator, but a mystery wrapped in a metaphor. 3 words that set the stage for one of the most towering epics in American literature. I'm Lee Stewart, here to talk with you about these 3 words and the entire opening passage of Moby-Dick, Herman Melville's epic philosophical adventure about obsession, mortality, and a boatload of archaic descriptions about whales and whaling. Damn it to the depths, Ishmael. The amount of descriptions were something. But we're not here to talk about whales. Not yet, anyway. Rather about why and how this opening passage sails us into a universe of existential musings and maritime adventure. And, as we do every episode, to try and answer that question, is it perfect prose? Alright, if you've seen my other videos, you'll know we don't just cruise over these powerful passages, we plunge their depths. But before we dissect it, let's check out the opening from bow to stern. Call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse, and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. It is a way I have of driving off the spleen and regulating the circulation. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, and especially whenever my hypos gets such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off, then I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. With a philosophical flourish, Cato throws himself upon his sword. I quietly take to the ship. There is nothing surprising in this. If they but knew it, almost all men in their degree, sometime or other, cherish very nearly the same feelings towards the ocean with me. To make this daunting piece of genius more palatable, we'll carve it up into 9 digestible pieces. First, we'll explore the legendary opening line. Then, how the next line sets the stage for what's to come, which is the call to adventure. This leads on to Melville's introduction of the philosophy of sailing, and then a descent into darkness. It's no accident there's a breaking point next, and we'll unpack it. From here, we'll chat about the theme and character connections. Yes, all this is evidenced in this passage. So too is our next segment, touching on the universal truths inherent in the passage, and we'll round it all off with some final thoughts. Part 1. The opening line. Let's unpack this like the word nerds we are. First, that opening line, call me Ishmael. Simple, unadorned, and direct. 3 words, 13 characters, infinite mystery. It's a good lesson for writers. Brevity is the soul of intrigue. And why is this brief line so soulful, so effective? For one, it's an invitation, a deliberate breaking of formality. Ishmael isn't saying, my name is Ishmael. No. His phrasing teases us with an alias, a persona. It's both intimate and mysterious, setting the tone for a story that's as much about identity as it is about whales. It's an intriguing question, right? Is Ishmael his real name? Probably not. He seems to choose it like a mask, referencing the biblical Ishmael, a wanderer, an outcast. Melville sets up his narrator as both a guide and an enigma. Notice how the brevity contrasts with the sprawling sentences that follow. It's a trick. Melville reels us in before letting his sentences swell like ocean waves. Part 2. Setting the stage. Then there's the rhythm of the next sentence. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, Melville's genius abounds here. This sentence is so casual, it almost feels like a shrug. Meandering like a tide, it reflects the narrator's own aimlessness. Look at the work it does. That dash? It creates a pause, something evasive, Melville's wink at the reader, a subtle dismissal of specifics to focus on the big picture. Ishmael is keeping us at arm's length, and yet the rhythm pulls us in. Melville builds tension by withholding details. Let's not skim over the phrase "never mind" either, because it's a magician's misdirection. Don't focus on the when, focus on the why. That's where adventure leads. Part 3. The Call to Adventure. If you're still not harpooning with excitement, how about the next portion? Having little or no money in my purse, and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. To those who think writers can't compete with cinema, Melville proves you wrong, because here his prose becomes cinematic. Can't you just see Ishmael standing on a dock, the sea stretching infinitely before him? Melville introduces the idea of escape. The words "little or no money" and "nothing particular" capture the monotony of land life. Contrast that with the phrase "watery part of the world," and you get something poetic and expansive, evoking both the physical ocean and the metaphysical unknown. In other words, this escape isn't purely physical, it's philosophical. Part 4. The Philosophy of Sailing. Our next sentence: "It is a way I have of driving off the spleen and regulating the circulation." Okay, Melville, stop showing off. Who else would describe going to sea as a medical remedy? In case this sentence isn't doing anything for you, let me lube your mind up with a spattering of metaphorical whale oil by explaining that the phrase "driving off the spleen" is a nod to 19th century medicine, where spleen often referred to melancholy. Regulating the circulation, which comes next, is functional, rhythmic, and slightly humorous. Here's a fast fact: Melville's dry wit permeates Moby-Dick. It's a survival mechanism for both Ishmael and the reader, especially during those thorough whaling passages. What's interesting is Melville wrote in longhand, and his prose reflects that. It's intricate, looping, and deeply layered. He wasn't afraid to slow down, sometimes to a fault, but this opening shows he knew how to keep us hooked. The sentence structure mirrors the ebb and flow of the sea. Coincidence? Don't be ridiculous. Part 5. The Descent into Darkness. Next line: "Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet." Melville leans into his narrator's existential dread. Notice the repetition of "whenever." It's hypnotic, pulling us into Ishmael's spiral. And that phrase, "damp, drizzly November in my soul," get out of here, Melville. You're making us look like chumps. Because that's not just weather. That's an entire mood. Melville's language is rich, tactile, and visceral. He transforms weather into an emotion. It's almost synesthetic. You don't just read it, you feel it, hear it, smell it. And while Melville's prose is dense, it's also alive with humor. The line about coffin warehouses? It's macabre, yes, but darkly funny. And that's the brilliance of Melville. He can make you chuckle and shiver in the same breath. This sentence tells us why Ishmael needs the sea, to stave off despair. It's his lifeline. And it's a reminder that the book, at its core, is about survival, not just against whales, but against the void. Part 6. The Breaking Point. And especially whenever my hypos gets such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off. This is Ishmael's breaking point. More dark humor, but relatable. Melville uses hats as a stand-in for societal norms. It's absurd, but also brilliant. Melville grounds Ishmael's inner turmoil in an almost cartoonish act of rebellion, and the word methodically is chillingly precise. Part 7. Theme and character connections. Then, I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. With a philosophical flourish, Caedmon throws himself upon his sword. I quietly take to the ship. Let's connect this to the preceding two pieces of prose and the story's deeper themes. Ishmael is a man adrift, literally and figuratively. His damp, drizzly November soul isn't just an emotional state, it's a metaphor for human discontent. And that bit about methodically knocking people's hats off? That's Melville's dry wit, masking profound existential despair. But Ishmael doesn't seek therapy. He seeks the sea. This paragraph also foreshadows the central conflict. Ishmael's struggle with his own hypos, or low spirits, mirrors Captain Ahab's obsession with Moby-Dick. Both men are grappling with forces beyond their control, whether it's the vastness of the ocean or the vastness of the human condition. Here's another fast fact that offers some extra context. Melville himself struggled with mental health. The hypos, short for hypochondria or melancholy, might be more autobiographical than fictional. Writing Moby-Dick was his way of navigating his own storms. In a sense, his way of grappling with his own November soul. Part 8. Universal Truths. If they but knew it, almost all men in their degree, sometime or other, cherish very nearly the same feelings towards the ocean with me. Melville casts a wide net with this one. He universalizes Ishmael's experience. The sea becomes a metaphor for freedom, escape, and the sublime. The sentence ties the personal to the universal, giving it weight and resonance. If you didn't know, Herman Melville spent years as a sailor. He worked on whaling ships, and his first-hand experience with the sea's perils and wonders is all over this paragraph. Much like Ishmael, he was drawn to the sea during a damp, drizzly November of his life. But unlike Ishmael, Melville wasn't just escaping melancholy. He was also escaping debt. That real-world wanderlust gives the prose an authentic, weathered quality. You can feel the salt spray in the words. That sense of awe and dread is authentic. Unfortunately, when Moby-Dick was first published, it was a commercial flop. Melville died thinking his magnum opus was a failure. If only he could see it now, the classic his work became. Part 9. Final thoughts. Okay, we've covered a small portion of an iconic book that, if you haven't read in full, you should. The premise alone is epic. A profound tale of obsession and revenge, told by Ishmael, chronicling a captain named Ahab's monomaniacal quest to hunt the eponymous white whale who bit his leg off during a previous voyage. The novel Moby-Dick is a deep dive for another time. For now, my perfect prose pursuers, I ask you this. Is the novel's opening passage perfect prose? On one hand, Melville's style isn't for everyone. It's dense, could be argued meandering, and is sometimes overwhelming. On the other, this passage is a microcosm of the entire novel, profound, poetic, and endlessly thought-provoking. Perhaps perfection is impossible. The pursuit, however, is where the fun is. Read on!